geeks of all ages, shapes, and sizes, whatever your preferences are, sci-fi hounds, welcome back to our third.
This is really number 3.
This is our third installation of the Snorefest that is our Star Trek film franchise discussion, part 3 featuring the works of 5 and 6, which will end the original series as a whole, their film series. And with every high, there must come a low. Again, I am Lady Fatblood, this is a Cranky Critic, and our high point being Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
A complete success from where they came and only going up.
A colossally entertaining film. Smash hit, not just because of the fans loving it, but it brought in a whole new group of people that never would have seen a Star Trek film otherwise.
Brought in a new TV show.
And the movie still holds up well. It's a fun little romp, though it's not really too much sci-fi related, but it is, but it's not.
But it's still good Star Trek.
It is good Trek. It's not traditional Trek.
Traditional Trek, yes.
But it still feels like Trek, and that was the point of the film. It managed to bring in the best of both worlds. So
slip that one in there really quick.
Why not? Anyway, so
the Hard Bennett production company has been doing extremely well. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Leonard Nimoy directed the last 2 films. William Shatner comes in onto Star Trek IV and says, in my contract, if we make a part 5, I get to direct part 5.
And I'm gonna be high.
And so William Shatner finally gets his chance at the reins. This is the one I like to talk about. Cranky Critic and all, I like to try to find what went right and what went wrong.
Now, some people would argue everything went wrong in this movie, and I have to respectfully disagree, but I have my reasons.
Mm-hmm.
We both have our reasons, but to just to put it out there, this was not the film we would watch very often when we were younger. This was probably the one right next to the motion picture that we would avoid like the plague. And this had quite a bit of vitriol from us, and the score included, which shame on us.
Boy, I remember burn this cassette tape out.
So the year is 19... No, anyway. The year is 1989.
89, the year of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the year of Batman,
Tim Burton's
Batman, and then you get Star Trek V. Oh, and it was also the year of Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, right? Or was that 97? No, I'm actually stand corrected. I think that was 87.
I think it was 87.
That was Jaws: The Revenge that matched that one. Never mind, I'm wrong.
Yeah, we don't need to compare
Last Crusade,
shit.
Last Crusade, Batman, and Star Trek V. Unfortunately, I laugh at the advanced poster of this film that shows a movie theater seat with seatbelts across the seat in a starfield, and it says why they are putting seatbelts in theaters this summer. Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. And that is an absolute laugh.
Sweethearts. What the hell?
I am not going to bash William Shatner. I do believe the man has a vision. The man has an ability to direct. This was just his first time out. This was also something he was pushed into that I don't think he was really ready for at the time. There are some good books out there. I think he wrote, or his daughter wrote one of the books about the challenges of Star Trek V. And it's definitely a good read. But I've kind of watched a lot of fan groups and things of that nature that have connected to this film. And you learn more about the challenges that came with this production. Now, Mr. Leonard Nimoy, coming off of 2 successful films, one much more successful than the other, is good friends with William Shatner. And he didn't want to come through, and at least he's come publicly saying he didn't want to come and step on his feet and try to tell him what to do. There were a couple times, I guess, there were script rewrites because Spock, he felt that Spock would not do certain things. Such as a time during the dream sequence when Sybok was going through their emotions. And then eventually Spock was going to get angry with Captain Kirk and walk away from him. And basically not follow him. And Leonard Nimoy came back and said, I don't think that after everything that Kirk and Spock had gone through, I don't think that Spock would ever leave the captain's side. And that's what you get in the film. A little bit of Nimoy trying to say, look at what we just did, let's not stray too far. And I think that's where he also got the dialogue back to Cyborg and said, you may know me, but you do not know who I am. You know, I am not that invalid boy that you left many years ago. You look at those couple dialogue lines, you could scream it's Nimoy.
Yeah.
He's going, nah,
yeah.
I'm not going to, this is something I came back to, and we're not going to mess this up. But of course, we're forced to, through contract, to have him do a film. Look at Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Let's start with the vision of the movie before we talk about what actually became the movie. First off, it had a strong, hefty budget. You look at the film, and it is highly on-location shooting, which is not cheap. Because of the success of Star Trek IV, the studio was confident enough. Harv Bennett, you're doing a well, good job. There you go. Let's go do some on-location shooting, and let's make 5 really grand. Supposedly, Shatner had always wanted to do the story of the Enterprise seeking God, and an original series, and these kind of things have come up before with, I think, Gene Roddenberry is what they talked about, and where it just never really worked. It never really had a good chance, even though the motion picture almost touched on it a little bit. It was about finding a deity, about finding that creator, about finding the one who is, like us, and the one we want to connect to. We seek that in our human nature. So the motion picture already had kind of an image of that. But yet, you look at where Star Trek was. The Next Generation had now been on the air for about 3 years. They had an excellent cliffhanger, which has turned into one of the pivotal moments in Star Trek franchise history. And then the film franchise continues on with this challenge of a production. If you look in the movie of Star Trek V, you will notice the corridor scenes are the Next Generation corridors. You will notice a couple of shots that are Next Generation sets. Namely, let's see, I want to say 10 Forward was a specific room. I'm trying to remember. But
maybe the wheel?
I don't think it was that one, because I know 10 Forward was a different room in 6. But I want to say they used it in 5 as well. Now, why can't I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, they had built a large set, which was the Shuttlebay Set. And that was on one of the largest stages at Paramount. And that set went extremely over budget. And unfortunately, it did not have a lot of screen time. When you watch the Michael Okuda narration over the DVD and Blu-ray, and they talk about how every time they tried to show a shot from that set, it was just to get money on camera. And it was, we need to use this. That's why they put an action sequence in there. At the same time, it was, they had a lot of visions of how the ending would go. And they had to start filming and going before that was completely realized. But Shatner, of course, wanted to take a darker tone in the story. And it was a story about seeking God, and ultimately they find hell. That is the ultimate premise of just like a one-sentence vision of the film. In the world of Star Trek of the time, we have the Vulcan story is already well known, and you have Vulcans without emotions. And you have the Klingons in Next Generation on TV are now friends with the Federation. So it wasn't a big, let's go with the Klingon story. It was, let's go with the Vulcan story and do a little twist on it and make a Vulcan with emotions. Let's surprise the audience. And let's tie it to Spock. That, I think, was the biggest mistake. Trying to say that Spock has a half-brother who is half-human, right? No. He's full Vulcan, but he chose to not follow the Vulcan ritual and the Vulcan way. So he was banished from Vulcan, but he shares the same father, so Sarek is his father.
Yes.
Wouldn't it have been awesome to have had Sarek in this movie?
It would have provided something
some
more
other dialogue in depth. Now they put Sarek in it as a young Sarek in one of the vision sequences, and it's just the So human frustration, but that's connected to Spock. And that's where that scene, I think, is extremely strong in dialogue and drama, because it still carries on that frustrating characterization between Spock and his father. Ever so lightly was it touched. But I think, even though in my memory watching the old movie and going into those dream sequences, like, all right, here's where the movie slows down, here's where it gets boring. But now those are almost the most favorite scenes in the entire movie, because each one of them gets touched. Well, beyond Kirk, of course, because he kind of does the big captain.
Kirk doesn't need no damn flashback.
So of course Shatner was giving himself a strong billing. But in the end, why did we really need to go to Yosemite? Okay, we tried to create some story off of that. Every time I go to Yosemite, I play Jerry Goldsmith's score, and is this another Entrada release? I think it is. Sony Music, excellent. Jerry Goldsmith rocks.
Which again, Star Trek V is probably my favorite overall score.
It's very operatic.
Yeah.
It just seems to be.
There's something very familiar.
What's the right word for it?
It's hard to say. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what his theme is with the mountain.
Oh, this is La La Land. LaLaLandRecords.com.
There's something about there's something very, I don't know, I want to say cerebral a little bit, because you have the main theme, which is the mountain, which you hear on the mountain with when Kirk is climbing Yosemite, and then they have the Free Minds theme, which is very subtle and just a testament of what Jerry Goldsmith was capable of. When you handed him a not so great film, he would always turn in his A game with his score.
And I believe the post the film being released, of course, Jerry Goldsmith was frustrated with the movie's approach and how the final result of the film came to be. And so that's why Jerry Goldsmith didn't return for Star Trek VI, but he had just recently done the theme for The Next Generation. So of course he brings back his themes from the motion picture, because that's what's popular.
Yeah.
Star Trek is popular. It's in the 20th anniversary and beyond. We have his famous scene, the theme that he brings in, gives it a new flair. He brings in some new themes which are very, very subtle in his following films that he does return for, which I think are excellent. You'll hear a little bit of Star Trek V in First Contact. It's really, really good stuff. But just very subtle. It's kind of just there. So it's nice to see where Jerry Goldsmith didn't let Star Trek V disappear. You know, he kept it going.
He brought back his Klingon theme.
Exactly, which then becomes...
We hadn't heard it since the motion picture.
It becomes a little corny, because we did get a film where the studio has stepped in and they said, here's the thing, the last film was funny and it was successful. We want humor in this movie as well. And I think that was the biggest detriment. Yes, Shatner was going for a darker film, but the humor was forced and it didn't blend well with the theme.
That's true.
This film could have worked a lot better if it was just completely a darkened film.
There was a bit of tonal dissonance with how you could kind of, if you step back and, like you said, look at the story they were trying to tell, which, okay, essentially what the movie ends up becoming is you find out that Spock has this half-brother who is full Vulcan, who has renounced his Vulcan heritage, and he is fully emotional. And this Vulcan is seeking God. And he believes it is at the center of the galaxy once you breach this great barrier that's there. And so he hijacks the Enterprise knowing that his brother is on the ship, and he feels like that's probably an easier way.
He didn't know Spock was on.
Oh, that's true. So why the hell did he go after the Enterprise? It just happens to be. Because the Enterprise is the only ship in the quadrant.
There it is. Then that's always it.
That's what it always boils down to.
Like part one, we're the only ship in the quadrant. Why would you leave Earth defenseless?
It's always, because they're always, that's right.
Oh, we're on shore leave and the ship's in mothballs, but you're the only ship in the quadrant.
That's right. He was surprised that he saw. So it's been a while. Sorry. Anyway, so he hijacks the Enterprise because they're the only ship around. They're the only ship the Federation has. Who are we kidding? There are no other ships. It's just the Enterprise. And so he convinces the entire crew with his his Vulcan Jedi mind tricks, he frees them of their pain, so they follow him. With the exception of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, who McCoy actually at first does kind of, and then once Spock snaps out of it, I think that's what kind of convinces McCoy, like, oh yeah, what am I doing? Yeah. And so they're the ones who are kind of held captive in a way, and so they find the what is it, Shukari, which there's a story behind that. And they find God, only to discover that God is a dick who basically wants off of the planet and wants to hijack the Enterprise himself. And Sybok, Spock's brother, is so blinded by it that at first he doesn't understand that this isn't really God, and then he realizes, oh crap, I've been duped. And they have their own little fight, and then the end kind of fizzles out from there.
It has its really good moments, but they're short.
Yeah.
They're short and they're sweet.
When you see what the film was trying to do, first of all, you kind of get a grasp for what went wrong, what could have been. But you also, I think something that the movie still somewhat managed to do well was the characters were still there.
The 5 and 6 sequels focused on the Trinity. They were the main 3 stars and the main 3 in the full film. The others were much more supporting in 5 and 6.
Yes.
I heard that Walter Koenig's entire film for Part 5 was a total of 9 days.
I believe that.
And he was very, very small role in that film. Of course, Star Trek V also fulfilled the final contract from 4, and where they were all required to return for 5 if 5 was made. And it was a fulfillment of a contracting film. And so therefore that's why Sulu was still there, and that's why Walter Koenig was in a smaller spot. But the moments where you had Kirk, Spock, and McCoy together, the connection was still there. You can tell that some of the scenes in the Yosemite fire camping scene and some of the stuff at the end were like last minute scripted reshoots just to connect the film in some way, because the film had such a troubled production. They came down to the end and go, okay, well, how do we connect this? Well, let's go shoot this, talk about that, and it connects it. And so I see where obviously the production's overbloated, it's having problems. I believe the reason the Enterprise set bridge set was changed was because of the Next Generation utilizing the set during the early series. They had destroyed it.
Wow.
And because, of course, the set, the Next Generation being, the current show, they're using the props of the films into their show, and I guess they had already utilized too much of it, and they had to go build another set, and that's why you have a completely different bridge for 5. And you look at it, it was also trying to do a bridge at a very trim budget. You'll notice the Next Generation went to console screens of all glass, and suddenly the Enterprise A is now also a console screen with glass. Well, maybe that's just more coincidence because it was the current look of the time, what everybody liked, but also Herman Zimmerman, who was the production designer, 5 was his first film. He is the production designer of The Next Generation, and he stuck through all the way through Nemesis. This is where the sets became very consistent. So you have a different production company making The Next Generation, which is the Rick Berman production company. Where he don't really have a production name, but it was under his producing credits. And then you have the Harve Bennett film, but yet they're sharing set pieces and crossing over to save money and save budget and things of that nature. So it's very interesting to see how they did that from a production standpoint. But there was supposed to be this ending, and an ending is where the movie really has to either sell the audience or not. And the fact is the idea was going to be that when they tried to shoot and kill the god creature on the planet, there was going to be the entity of the creature would go into the rocks and raise these rock creatures out from the ground, and they would chase them, portraying a hellish planet. Okay, great. But unfortunately, they went with this story and this idea without having any of the rock creature suits finished. And as the months went on, they were saying the production's going overboard and we can't get these outfits produced. We can have 5, we're now going to have 3, we're now going to have 1. And then when they do test shoots, they're like, wow, this is not going to be convincing. This is a year of practical effects, optical effects, no computer effects, no CGI yet. One of the first CGI shots from Star Trek came in Star Trek 6 and not in 5. We were still too early in 89. So they decided they had to scrap that ending and go with a different option. They were going to go back to the studio and ask for more money, and the studio said, no, we're done. You're already over budget, you're done, we're not giving you anything. They had to go into the editing process in the editing room and find an ending. And that ending became the God creature following them and just running away from it. It sounds funny.
It shows.
And it shows. And of course, it looks like the company they decided to go with the special effects for the film and to begin with.
Who, Bob?
Yeah, Bob Farron. There's a big story about
Basement Bob?
where he came to the studio and gave a great presentation on some basics. The model from Paramount went to his studio to be used for the Enterprise A, which happened to be the same model from the motion picture. This is the same model being used over and over and over again. And so, in that process, he didn't fulfill what he promised to do when they gave him the money. And when the budget got cut, they weren't able to finish the optical shots. And
boy, does that
the effects really, really showed it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was an effects-heavy film.
It was.
It was a film that needed heavy effects. And that's because that's the type of story that they were writing. Whereas Star Trek 4 had a few, but it wasn't a lot.
Very
effects
little.
were very different. They weren't the spaceship effects. They were the marine animal effects. It was the big
probe,
practical.
and
All that kind of
you
stuff.
had barely a spaceship in that film.
A completely different approach to a movie. That's where every movie is in its own right and its own element, and you've got to be the director and the producer working together to make that happen. And it seems like William Shatner did not have the reins, so to speak, as strong as he could have, and probably compromised in one too many areas where he let the studio run over him a little bit, and therefore the challenges continue. So good moments in the film were there, but mostly only the film moments are going to be found by fans.
Yeah, that's where we come to why exactly is it do we still kind of love the film despite its grievous flaws? And we know the movie is not good. We know this is not as good as Trek is going to get.
Correct.
We know that this is a low point for Star Trek. We know that. But I think when you are a fan of classic Trek, you see those moments that come through with the big three characters, and especially with your insight into the behind the scenes, and when you kind of know what they were trying to do, I think I tend to forgive it a little bit more. I think I've mostly forgiven it because of the Jerry Goldsmith score.
Of course.
But that aside, there's just something. It's cheesy. The jokes are bad. It's almost like a dad movie where it's full of dad jokes, and it's disappointing in a lot of ways when you see what the movie is sandwiched between. It's sandwiched between 4 and the ultimate finale that is Star Trek 6, and so it is a very unfortunate shit sandwich that it kind of became. But I still forgive it, and I do still love it. I have a love for
I
this
think
film.
it comes from the screenwriter. The screenwriter of 5 was David Lowery or something of that nature, and I think it went through a couple different screenwriters. But again, who's creating the script and the dialogue, and that's where the cheesiness came from. Did McCoy still make me laugh? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think also the element in the Harv Bennett franchise, the opening title sequence, which was before the title, which had never happened in a Star Trek movie, so they had a little scene before the title, kind of like a TV episode.
Yeah.
It was positioned that way. It was like we're showing you a little clip to cliffhang you and go into the title sequence. The Laughing Vulcan, nobody had ever seen that before.
Yeah.
So to that era in 1989, to that Star Trek environment and that audience, that could have been the wow moment. You're a Vulcan, and he's laughing, and it cliffhangs you to go through the title. Was it successful? Maybe. I think less successful today. Because the Laughing Vulcan thing has been done, and the Vulcan story has been fleshed out through the rest of Star Trek, that it's less impactful today. But in 1989, that, to the fans, probably was a big deal. and it probably was a turning point of, let's try this. I think Lawrence Luckinbill did an excellent job with what he had.
Yeah.
I think he was shadowed because the writers wanted Sean Connery as that character, and didn't get it.
Phat Chiang.
Didn't get it. So, understandable. I don't think Sean Connery would have made the movie any better. I think he would have overshadowed the film because he would have been taking top billing.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that would have been a poor choice.
Yeah, and Sean Connery, all you have to do is look at Highlander 2. Sean Connery knows when he's in shit, and I think he would have... I think where Lawrence Luckinbill was very genuine in his portrayal of Sybok, I think Sean Connery would have been a little snarky.
Yeah.
I think he would have been a little too... I think he would have laid it on a little too thick. Even if they could have afforded him, which they could not have.
I eventually think that I love his acting in the film more than just about anyone else, because I think he went in saying, I'm going to make this something.
Yeah.
I get a little tired of the scene where he has the long monologue talking to the ship and telling and revealing to the audience, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the film does a couple question marks. What the heck is this guy doing? Until the end of Act 2, and he finally tells the audience, we're going to the planet Shakari.
Yeah.
Okay. Could that have been revealed a little different way? Yes, I think it would have been stronger. But, of course, we had to get the whole... scene where Shatner had to realize that I ordered you to defend your ship. You ordered me to kill my brother. He's not a fellow. He's not your brother. You don't have a brother. And it's like, it's a scene that where it's, again, the audience is almost having to catch up. Even though it's still the reveals as the movie goes, and that's what a whole plot in the movie has to do. It has to keep the audience interested as we go. I think when he reveals what he's doing ultimately to find God, it's kind of a letdown in that portion of the film. And I think that's where that scene was weak, where everybody's just kind of watching this TV monitor of the ship. And it's just dragging. And it's like, whoa, why are we here?
Yeah.
But otherwise, Lawrence Luckinbill sold that character, had a passion, had a vision, hampered by the script. Did we really need to see her dancing? Naked.
Oh.
Was that really Shatner's idea to say, but I got an idea,
Oh. That was the best we could come up with for a distraction.
Honestly, we have a cast of a bunch of old people. Where is this going to be fun? When she's got gray hairs in her hair, and we're going to see her naked in the shadows.
Whose idea was that? Who thought that would be a good idea? I demand to know this.
I let it go, and I still watch the film.
Yeah.
But it becomes one of those things that you question, why?
Whose idea was this?
Okay, the Catwoman with 3 breasts.
We know whose idea that was.
But the poorly edited job where she jumps on his back, and in the very next shot as we pull out, she's 90 degrees over his shoulder.
Yeah.
And it was poorly shot.
Yeah.
And it could be shot in a different way. Kind of like I'd say with Jaws of Revenge, you shoot the shark a different way, it will be much more menacing. You won't see the mechanics on the bottom of the shark all the time. Well, in Star Trek V, we see the wires connected to Shatner while he's throwing them between the shuttlecraft. Okay, this is 89. You cannot digitally take out the wires in these movies. I understand Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. I understand the budget cuts that had on that. This one seemed to have the same type of problems, and they just didn't keep it out of the shot. It got in the shot, and it made it to the final cut.
Yeah.
Hoping your eyes aren't going to see it.
Yeah, the turbo lift scene with Spock
and you can see the shadow of the boom that's driving them. I'm like...
Yeah.
And then you could tell when their legs are limp, because they're being held from up here, and then you could tell when their legs are, platformed, and they're just standing on a platform because they're being raised up and up. It just wasn't sold.
Yeah.
Now the shot with Spock flying next to the mountain, and you can tell that beam is covering. He's covering it up for the camera. It was effective. The shoes don't look like they're flat, but it could have been stronger. But I think it was okay. But then when you first got to that first shot of Shatner falling optically, it took you out of the film. If they kept the shot with just the stuntman falling,
Yeah.
you would have sold it.
Yeah.
Because the shot when he stops sold me for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that that shot was a horizontal shot, faked with trees
Yeah.
on a side wall.
Yeah.
When you look close, you could see the gravity
Yeah.
pulling the trees.
Yeah.
That's what looked funky and unfamiliar. But I didn't learn that until much later. So, okay, I give him credit for that one because you caught me. I didn't catch that. But, there were just some other things that just started becoming laughable. And, yeah, okay, the movie's got a sense of humor to it, but that's not its strong point. Its strong point is it's really a somber topic. It's a topic that's just, well, really? You're trying to get serious in this quest for God now? And in the deity? And it's supposed to have been this creature from this far-off planet gave him a vision of where he was? So now you're telling me this whole adventure was a joke?
Yeah. And then you have the kind of out of place but important to the end of this particular, the way this movie ended up with the Klingons chasing after them,
now,
also breaking through the barrier.
I give the credits for the casting. There were two stunt people. I want to say gymnasts or very, very strong.
Yeah, they were like bodybuilders.
They were bodybuilders, some of that sort.
Yeah.
Great casting choice, and I think they brought a flair to it. I heard there was a couple of deleted scenes that they got on the floor with them too, where they kind of showed their affection for each other more because they were a couple, like this rogue couple that really didn't make it to the final cut. And I think they did a great job being the strong, powerful Klingons, but the problem is the script was just still very, very poor. There was no reason for them to be there.
Yeah.
It was just the Klingons are the bad guys, and
Yeah.
here we go.
Who just magically show up by the end because they have a former Klingon ambassador, or whatever he is, that talks them into letting Spock onto their ship so that he can save Kirk from the evil god. In that horrible, horrible shot where you just turn around and is this really ugly animated bird of prey, and Kirk is just
Now
awful.
I've read what the original ending was supposed to be, and it's got a lot of the same elements. Originally, the crew of the Enterprise would shoot the god creature, and let's see if I can remember this correctly. I'm starting to lose it. But the rock creatures would come up, and they would chase them to the shuttlecraft. When they transported up Kirk, or Spock and McCoy, they accidentally transport rock creatures onto the Enterprise. And they had to shoot the rock creatures, which destroys the transporter room. Not the Klingons shooting the ship.
Right.
And amongst all of that, it comes back to the story of Shatner climbing the wall, and the rock creatures are climbing up. You have those red eyes creatures that look really mysterious, and smoke and heat and fire, and climbing and chasing him up the rock stone. And of course, the Klingons show up. And it was supposed to be that the Klingons shot all the rock creatures on the ground. What did we get? The rock creatures are gone. The god creature breaks into the shuttlecraft and shoots some lightning bolts. And the Klingons show up because they've been following them this whole time. And they go, "We want Captain Kirk. I want him right now." And it's like, okay. And then I think it was a nice touch that they put Spock onto the ship because it was a surprise reveal to the audience.
Yeah.
You didn't expect that. But was it strong enough for the ending? Probably not.
No.
And it gave a nice moment, but it was almost like we didn't get an ending yet before this moment. And you're telling me this is it?
Yeah.
But I do love the scene following. I thought the dialogue was well connective. And I think it was one of the lines that connected most to the previous films. And that was when Spock was somber and saying that I've lost a brother. And Kirk says, I lost a brother once. And I was, happy that I got him back.
Which, forget the original series where he had a brother. We're not going to mention that. He didn't have a brother that died right in front.
But this is the Harv Bennett Productions.
Yes.
Connecting to the Harv Bennett production films.
Of course.
And that immediately, to me, I think it just came off on film as a special moment. But when you look at Spock then look off camera to Kirk and stares at him, almost like to question him. A long stare, a long beat. And then, of course, McCoy comes in his line, I thought you said men like us don't have families. And, of course, it just turns into the I was wrong. And I think that was one of the ultimate scenes where they had to go connect with the Yosemite scene. Mm-hmm. The film was coming to wrap, and we didn't really have an ending, and we had to go film a couple things. Because I was told the campfire scene was the last thing shot in the film. And, honestly, that's the scene that connects everything.
Yeah.
So you see, like, when they went back and go, okay, we need something to connect this film. And I think they did as best as they could with what they had.
And with what had happened.
Thank you.
With all
and
that happened.
Unfortunately, Shatner gets a black nose and a black eye, or what do you want to call it, and it is history. It is what it is. I wish that the studio would give a proper treatment like they did with the motion picture. Mm. I would be all for it. I think CGI today could give you the ending he wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd rather prefer to see, just to try it.
Yeah.
Just give it a try.
Yeah, just to see if it would work.
Change all the effects to modern day effects, but don't change the way the effect is. Take the exact same shot and just modernize the shot, because there is an element to where the way they made the ships move and the way they made the things go, it still sticks it into the 90s. The camera movements, the angle shots still work. When you see the shuttlecraft come like this to the Enterprise far away, when you see it crash, I don't need no modernized 2016 or 2017 effects blowing in my face. Make it look like effects still from 1989, just clean it up. Meaning, like the motion picture did with the director's edition, they made new shots, but completely making them look like they were still matching to the old shots. So it doesn't come out and stand out as, something separate and added on. So I'd rather see 5 with a redone effects from beginning to end, but keep the same shots, don't go changing those. You can re-edit and trim where some things really aren't needed. I think Chekhov being in the chair was really kind of lame, but okay, whatever. It seemed a little more TV showish.
Well, the story, if you look at it at its most basic level, it is very original series-ish. Oh, suddenly Spock has a brother. Oh, he's hijacking the Enterprise. Oh, he's turned the crew against the captain. And oh, we're going to find God. And God turns out to be... It is a very episode type of story.
Absolutely.
Which, I think under the right circumstances, it had potential. We'll never know. That's the sad truth. We will literally
and
never know.
And you've got
if
poor special effects just like the TV show had.
Yo.
And so it really becomes an episodic film.
Yeah.
It was a film based upon TV episodes. It wasn't giving the audience more of 4. And it wasn't giving them what they've been accustomed to for the last 2 to 3 films. So that's where I think it stood out, and it had its challenges, but I find everything I can to enjoy it.
Yeah, and as much as I admit I do love the film, it is not the best, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel for the original crew. And in 1991...
Can you believe it?
Was it 1991?
When I showed you the clipping in the newspaper and said, let's go see Star Trek 6?
1991, which for the longest time, Star Trek 6 was the film in the franchise I was the least familiar with because, again, my mom did not buy VHS movies.
Right.
The box set that I had was 1 through 5 only. And my mom didn't really take me to go see movies a whole lot, if ever. And we didn't have cable, and so there was no way to get Star Trek 6 on cassette for a while. But when I did finally get Star Trek 6, it was off of, I want to say, HBO. So that was how I had it for the longest time. I did not own an actual proper release of Star Trek 6 for the longest. We got possibly one of the best finales that we could possibly get in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. In my opinion, I think it's probably the best finale that any Star Trek film, like as a accumulation of this particular series. The original series had their ending. The Next Generation, they had their great ending in their show, and unfortunately the films kind of went off and they never had a proper ending, but it didn't matter because the show had its ending.
That's right.
And now the trilogy, I hope it's done. The Bad Robot trilogy, I hope it's done. And if you're going to end it, I would prefer that it ended like that. But there was something about Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Again, a very different looking film. They had to come at it with a new approach, which, how do you do that? Well, you get a new director. Even though it's a director we've seen before. But, you know, for the longest time I didn't even realize that it was the same director for Star Trek 2. But you look at it, it's a very different looking film. This is probably the most, like you said, this is a very set driven,
Correct, because you had, again, the near failure of Star Trek V. It did make money, just not a lot, but it was a bigger budget film and nearly a failure. It warranted, they said they were willing to go to another, but the budget got cut. And you'll notice that Star Trek VI goes back to a soundstage film. Now, when I was young, I didn't notice that at all. Because in 1991, we didn't catch on to these things. I caught on to this a little bit more when I was older. Now, I believe there's going to be an error in the last video, which I've just realized, that in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home and When Next Generation was released, that was the 20th anniversary. Star Trek VI was the 25th anniversary.
Oh, yeah, because 86.
I have my years wrong. I'm sorry. So hopefully you watched the last video and didn't comment on that. But
oh, they did.
Yes, of course. Star Trek VI.
Star Trek 4 came out in 1986. That is 20 years after.
I'm not doing math here.
1966. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Actually, you are wrong. Anyway.
Corrected myself in the next video. Thank you very much.
Anyway.
I had seen The Next Generation on TV from my mom.
And at this point, I was not watching The Next Generation. I did not come into The Next Generation until very late in the game.
And I only watched it loosely because my mother would watch it at home. She decided to take me to go see Star Trek VI in theaters, and I said sure. I went in and I loved it. I was a little confused.
Yeah.
Because I was a new fan at the time.
Yeah, 91. It took this guy that long to finally get into the damn show.
And so here comes the film, and I was confused as to why I just saw Sarek on The Next Generation in the Unification episode, and Sarek passed away. It was actually the first original character in Star Trek lore that was a recurring role that actually had died in the franchise.
For keeps.
For keeps. And then I saw him in theaters, and I'm like, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Because I was young, in junior high at the time, and so I didn't understand these were taking place at two different times.
Yeah, I mean, how would you know?
Here I am, a fan.
You never had any interest in the original series. You barely followed The Next Generation. How are you going to know?
And I did not catch, until much later, all the Next Generation sets that are in the film.
Yeah, of course.
Engineering. I way over my head for a long time. I was like, oh, well, they're just matching warp cores because it's like one leads to the next. No, I was like, ooh, okay. And then, of course, I just really loved the industrial light and magic work in that film.
Oh, God.
I was sold on the shot with the blowing through the saucer. I felt that the action sequence at the end just really impressed me on the quality of a big ship battle sequence.
That movie made me fall in love with the Klingon battlecruiser.
Absolutely.
I mean, the battlecruiser doesn't do anything in this film.
No.
It has this really sweeping pass-by shot. And of course, it gets attacked.
And you don't even see it in the darn movie, except for a shadow sequence and for most of it. But.
Well, the battlecruiser doesn't do much at all.
Oh, the battlecruiser.
Battlecruiser. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Because I had always hated the battlecruiser because all we'd ever really seen were really cheap shots in the original series, and then you barely saw it at all.
But they gave it a very awesome looking artistic
coloring. She was gorgeous in that movie, and that was the first time I was like, oh my God, the battlecruiser, look at that shit. But the Bird of Prey, this is the most badass we've seen the Bird of Prey, because as we find out, we get our first and only, I don't think we ever see this again, unless, something happens later on, the first and only bird of prey that can fire when cloaked. Did they
That-
ever bring that back?
They did not.
Okay.
The fact was that was something that, again, like the laughing Klingon, or the laughing Vulcan,
right.
in 5, it was one of those laws that was in Star Trek that was kind of known by the fan base that those laws can't be broken. All Vulcans don't have emotions, so that's going to be a wow moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're going to make the secret. We can have an invisible ship, and the good guys can't fight it.
Mm-hmm.
So it created an awe moment and a good mysterious solution is to putting the pieces together. The movie became a whodunit, and I really liked that part. It's unfortunate I can't go back and watch it and not know who it is anymore because, of course, part of it is just the excitement of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And putting it together.
And the movie does, again, even though, we already have the trilogy of 2, 3, and 4, this movie does call back a bit to
4.
To Star Trek 4, and that we get a character directly. Was it Cartwright?
Yes.
Is that his name?
Admiral Cartwright.
Admiral Cartwright, who was just a secondary, but visible character in Star Trek 4, gets brought back into the fray in this one, and it turns out he is part of the conspiracy that you find out that basically one of the major moons of Klingon has exploded.
Which is interesting. The moon is named Praxis.
Correct.
And it's a Klingon moon of Kronos. It's a mining moon. And the interesting part is just the little detail that they put into Star Trek Into Darkness when you go to Kronos and you have the exploded moon next to it.
Oh,
I was
Lord.
like, okay, you did your homework.
Oh,
Fine.
Oh boy.
Check it out next time when you watch Into Darkness. If you ever watch Into Darkness
I
again.
know, we'll get to that. So the moon explodes, which provides this conflict within the Klingon Empire in that because it is a mining.
It damages the atmosphere of the Klingon planet.
To the point where they without external aid, they are going to lose their livelihood,
Correct.
and eventually their empire is going to crumble within 50 years or so. It's
And
projected.
very reminiscent to what was happening at the time and the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it's just very poignant elements that really brought the story full circle of what Star Trek was all about.
And also finally kind of giving us an idea as to why it is that suddenly in the 24th century we are BFFs with the Klingon Empire and we are now one big happy family, where we in the 23rd century have always known the Klingons to be almost one of the greater foes of the Federation. The Romulans are always going to be like the jackasses, but they're always in the background scheming. But what we find interesting in this film is that it's not so the Klingons are deciding to come together with the Federation
Out of force.
to kind of have this uneasy truce, like, hey, we're not doing any favors. We need to focus on fixing ourselves. We don't need having this war with the Federation is no longer going to be beneficial to us. We need to come up with some kind of a truce. Well, the Klingons and the Federation have been through so much shit that people in the Klingon side don't trust the humans. The Federation and the humans, which are comprised of mostly, other aliens, not the Romulans, but there is a Romulan ambassador there. But a lot of the Federation doesn't trust the Klingons, and so what you get is this conspiracy of Klingons, a Vulcan, humans, and a Romulan all conspiring together so that this truce does not happen. And you find that interesting because it's the first time that you see it in the Federation, of people in the Federation, being shitty and being shady and conspiring to,
Conflict.
You get the assassination of the Klingon ambassador. And
Which happens to be David Warner, who was also in Star Trek V. And how he came back, that was very amazing and surprising that he'd want to come back for another role.
Yeah.
But he must have loved the crew or something of that nature well enough. Now note that this is not a Harve Bennett production. Harve Bennett ended his productions with V. The studio did not bring him back. Beyond that, Nimoy and Meyer were the two to bring this story to fruition. And in the scheme of things, now Shatner's got the black eye from the previous film. He was the last one to sign on for the movie. And rightly so. He had no reason to really want to come back and do this. But it seems like it was definitely a lot of Nimoy's soft hand to be able to nurse that into a positive direction. I think it shows his directing abilities and his capabilities. Nimoy was an excellent person to do this stuff, and he just got the right break somewhere along the line, and it took the Spock character to do that for him. Something he hated at first, and something that became him. It became his life, and residuals for years, for all the way to the end. But
of course,
the fact remains where if Nimoy were to direct this film, it's almost like a stab in the back. Well, Meyer, here, you go take this. And so it calmed things down, but you could tell that Nimoy had a very strong presence in the film. Spock was very strong in the film.
Yeah, and we had the new character of Valeris, who is, as far as I can remember, the first Vulcan whose name did not begin with a...
with an S, right?
Even though you had T'Pring or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
We had like one Vulcan in the history of Vulcans that didn't start with an S. So we had the Valeris character, who some people have said they originally wanted it to be Savick.
It was supposed to be Savick.
I don't know if I would have liked that, because it would have kind of come out of left field.
And what direction would you have gone with that? Would you have brought Rodman Curtis back to the role?
Yeah.
And suddenly turn her as a negative conspirator?
Yeah. And
I think that's why it was a good idea they didn't.
I'm glad that they didn't, because it just would not have made any sense. Either or, you weren't going to get Kirstie Alley back, but it's like it just wouldn't have made sense from a character standpoint. She had been with the crew, she had been through too much with the crew. I just don't see, and I think it was more interesting to have Valeris because she was what Savick was in the second film, which was she was fresh out of the academy, and she was the quoting regulations, and she was the brash young one who.
Just an excellent moment, 2 moments at the beginning of the film when Kirk pushes back on Spock. Why did you do this? We only had so many more months and we're done.
Yeah.
We don't have to go through this crap. We're out of here.
We've done our bit.
We've done it. Yeah, exactly.
For
and then it goes in. All right, here we get into the spaceship and the space dock, and let's get out of here. 1/4 impulse power. It's just this. Let's just get this over with.
Yeah.
And you heard the order, Lieutenant. I'm like, don't give me any shit right now because I want this done and over with. It's.
But the reaction, and then you go back to the characters in the film and
those that knew each other turn and smile, and it's
and they're expecting him to be like snippy, but he just has this look on his face like, you heard the order, Lieutenant.
A director makes a film. An actor follows the direction and does what they're paid to do, and brings any more light and experience to whatever the communication is behind the camera. Shatner did an excellent job in Star Trek VI, even though it wasn't necessarily the highest shining moment of his character, but for what the movie portrayed, these guys were old, they were done, they were tired, they could still get it done, and they still had a fan base, and they still pulled off an entire film. Now here we are with the George Takei story, and of course he was done with his contract in 5 and didn't really want to do another one, and his talk to them was, make me the captain of the ship and I'll come back. So of course they gave him a captain of the Excelsior, and he only got a little small role in the film, but he was there.
It was a strong role, though.
But he got what he wanted. He became a more prominent character, which led to another recurring scene in Voyager.
And he had a hero's moment in at the end of 6.
Correct, and it was very well tastefully done.
Yeah.
I think it was done well enough that the fans accepted it. And hence why you had the reoccurring character in Voyager for the anniversary farther down the line. Was that episode spectacular? No, but it's nostalgia, and that's what the fan base ended up going to. It was always a nostalgia moment.
Yeah.
But Star Trek VI just had all the right things going for it. It was well done with what they had. The only quirk I have with it, I think some of the takes that they chose were some lines that weren't really fleshed out well, and therefore it made a few scenes a little difficult to understand, especially the dinner table sequence. Some of the lines seemed to just be in the wrong tense, and therefore it took me a long time to really understand, that's what they meant. That's what they were saying. Where it was really a frustrating dinner conversation. The racism in this film comes up very heavily between humans and Klingons, and you see the scene where they transport away. Oh my God, thank God that's over. It's like, I hope we don't ever have to go through that again.
Did you see the way they ate? Yeah, it's
very reminiscent to stuff that's prominent today, and I think that's where Star Trek holds true. It's a topic that doesn't necessarily mean it's over.
Yeah.
It's something that's still relevant. It's just a movie that's not relevant. It's the era of the movie is not relevant to today, but the concept of the film and what takes place is very relevant to human nature. I want to say that there was a few moments in the film where it was kind of like we were rushing through the editing process. Again, the dinner table sequence came to a moment where if you watched behind the scenes and what they're going through, the dialogue was completely a different order. They went into the film and ordered the dialogue differently. You could tell because when Chiang, who we haven't talked about yet, comes and says, "To be or not to be?" That is the question that preoccupies our people. Everybody's smiling again in the scene. Everybody was smiling at the beginning of the dinner table scene, but then they all got frowns on their faces as the scene went on. But then that shot and that dialogue line was really early in the sequence when it was filmed, but through editing they placed it at the end to give the end, Earth, Hitler, 1938, I beg your pardon, and the silence, and to end the scene. It seemed like the way they originally had the scene to end wasn't so strong, so they flipped the editing of the scene around. Welcome to the power of editing, changing the film. But, it showed to me that I think that some of the dialogue didn't process great. There were times when Iman was speaking with him, and I was just, where is this going? Of course, her character being a traitor who was being paid to get them killed,
Right.
and which again I think was fine. The two Kirks fighting each other, fun moment, but it doesn't really stand out because today's world, when you do something like that, it would look 10 times better. It was old style and old effects, but it just comes down to where the movie was, what it was trying to do. It gave this crew one last adventure. It gave the fan base an opportunity to close the books properly. And you can get all the tears you want in the end of that movie, but it's just the way they sent that ship off into the sunset, and they signature handwritten their their actual autographs in the stars. It could not have been better.
That beautiful split between the Excelsior and the Enterprise.
Industrial Light and Magic, supreme leaders of special effects.
Yeah.
They were leading Star Trek for a long time because their Star Wars was not being done anymore.
Yeah.
This is where we're showing our grade of growth. They didn't get 5.
Yeah.
And I remember they said when they got the model back from 5 to go to ILM, it was destroyed. They changed it.
Good job, Bob.
It was just...
You're an asshole.
They had to go rebuild, repaint, do a lot of things to the darn thing because they changed the painting and the colors or something on it, I guess, for the different cameras that the other company would use. Again, a thing where you keep the same company going through, they're going to keep and take care of this stuff.
Yeah.
But, of course, in the world of Hollywood and budgets, those are the choices that are made. And that's just the nature of the beast.
So let's talk about General Chiang, played by
Christopher Plummer.
Unbelievably
Excellent.
amazing Christopher Plummer. Oh my God! So accompanying this finale of a film, and this is a finale of a film, we have this very operatic and bombastic feeling in that we have this general who's constantly quoting Shakespeare in the way that only a classically trained theatrical actor could do. And accompanying this, we have an amazing score by a man who's barely done anything in terms of scoring, Mr. Cliff Idleman. There's my little cassette again.
I think he was very young when he did this.
Yes, he was. He was very young.
I was really surprised because this score is nothing like any other soundtrack in Star Trek.
It is the most, with the exception of Rosamund, whose tone is very lighthearted,
Yes.
and so he is an oddball as well. But this is the most operatic Star Trek has ever gotten in terms of scoring, and it could not have fit any better with the way the film, the themes are presented. And again, you've got this villain, this over the top, but not at all in a bad way, villain in Chiang. Quoting his Shakespeare gleefully towards the end, loving every minute of his villainry, and you've got this score that is just, I can't even...
Somber at the beginning, build up, tragic, but yet archaic, simple, and then just, it feels to me like they tried to go for the send-off that 4 had done again, with the crescendo towards the end, but we weren't getting Lyndon Rosenman back, but this gentleman, Cliff Eidelman, really just hit it out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
And here's the original score on CD right here, and then of course, not long after, Entrada did release a special edition, an excellent special edition at that. They do a great job, as well as all the other companies bringing these soundtracks to life. And, you know, I had a special place in this for this movie in my heart, because it is the movie that made me a Star Trek fan. I don't watch it nearly enough. Is it my favorite film of all time in the Star Trek franchise? I think I have more of another one that sits close to my heart, only for certain other reasons. But this one is truly a movie I like to watch with the people that I grew up with.
Let's talk about for a second what they did. Was it the Blu-ray?
Oh, yes.
That had a total...
Yes, there was a...
George Lucas Star Wars...
It was a director's edition weird thing. It was not the Blu-ray, it was the DVD.
It wasn't the DVD, okay.
And it wasn't the... It wasn't the original DVD that was bare bones. It was the director's edition DVD that came in the gray case.
Right.
I didn't even keep that one.
It was essentially, it was like what George Lucas did to Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi, making Darth Vader yell no over and over when we knew exactly what he was.
You're absolutely right. I totally forgot about that.
Do you remember that?
And I believe that is still available on Apple iTunes today. You can buy the director's edition.
Was that the only thing that they added in that for the director's edition, or was there anything else? Because I don't...
No, okay.
I just remember because it was absurdly awkward and unnecessary.
No, you know what? I don't think that one... I'm sorry. There are two versions of the film. Oh my gosh, you're bringing back so many things. The original version of the film, Colonel West was not in the movie. The guy who played Rene Auberjonois.
That's right.
He was not in the theatrical version at all, with the scene of him in the council office.
And
therefore the ending did not have a human trying to assassinate the president.
That's right. In the theatrical version, I completely forgot about that.
Why haven't we watched these movies lately?
It's been a while. See, in the original theatrical, they had it in place that it was the Klingons, the humans, the one Vulcan, and the Romulans all conspiring together to keep the Federation and the Klingon Empire from coming together. And you see the new Chancellor, who's Gorkon's daughter.
Who was actually Kurtwood Smith.
Oh, that's right. He is on the verge of being assassinated because the daughter's already gotten up and spoken. She's already said her piece.
Yes.
And you see this Klingon about to who's trying to assassinate the president, and Kirk runs up and, Mr. President, ah! And in the theatrical, you think it's just a Klingon. Well,
the home video release
and in the version that they used to show on TV, right?
Correct.
There was this character called Colonel West who shows up wanting to create this escape plan to get Kirk and McCoy off of the prison planet, Rurapente. And
which also comes back in Star Trek 2009.
Oh, does it?
Remember?
Oh, that's right.
Where,
that's right. Okay.
The Romulan was...
Totally forgot. Totally forgot. It's been a while. And it's been a while. Everything's been a while. And so he ends up being a Klingon in disguise. The Colonel West character, you rip off the mask and you find out that he was... Well, because you didn't need another... Well, it's like you didn't need another Klingon conspirator because... It was fine that it was in, and it was fine that it wasn't either way, because you already had Cartwright that was involved in it. You already had General Chiang who was involved in it, so it didn't matter. It really, the Assassinator did not matter.
It seems to be they tried to keep things a little more understandable for the theatrical. Mm-hmm. But I think the fact that a human is portraying a Klingon was much more poignant, because it turned into... another level of these conspirators are so, hell-bent on making this look bad.
Yeah.
That even the Klingons truly aren't trying assassinating him. Their own humans are trying to assassinate him.
That's true.
And frame the Klingons in doing so.
That's true.
I honestly believe that I accept that ending over any other ending, because it makes more sense and more dramatic. Now, of course, I want to get back to your moment there, but the one thing that I noticed with the film was where they brought the CGI into Star Trek which was not only the Praxis explosion at the beginning of the film, but it was also the anti-gravity blood. And that sequence required that the Klingons have purple blood, because through the rating system, if they had red blood floating around and splatting all over the place, it would have been an R-rated movie. So, the Klingons don't have purple blood anywhere else in the Star Trek franchise.
Yeah. We've noticed that.
But here comes Star Trek VI and having purple blood, which then creates into that ending where the human is been the one who's shot, and it looks like a Klingon. They go, "This isn't Klingon blood,"
Yeah.
because they notice it's
Oh,
red.
remember Colonel Worf shows up, and it's
then,
also
and then Worf is
great
grandfather, whatever
like that.
maybe.
Yeah, that was an interesting little.
And
touch.
so there was a connection to Next Generation, even though they already had set pieces, but it was a loose connection because it was still Colonel Worf.
Yeah.
It was noticeably a family member, even though his crest was different on his head.
Yeah.
But obviously, Michael Dorn still playing the character,
Yeah.
which I think was still exceptional.
It was a nice touch. It was kind of nice to have that little bridge.
I remember that. I think there are other things on the actual theatrical version that it seemed like just little tidbits were cut out. Obviously, the Colonel West scene got to the.
And I liked that extended scene because
where John Schuck was in it from Star Trek 4.
Yeah, that's true. And I like the scene where he's trying to do these, plot out the escape. Is that the extended scene
Yes.
where he goes, "Those men have literally saved this planet,"
Yeah.
and he goes, "Now they're gonna save it again by standing trial," and then you cut to
Yeah,
Is
and
that-
that is when it goes to the trial, of course. But
Right.
in the home video version, it skips right over all of that, takes that character out so that the ending doesn't have it, and I felt that really did a disservice to the movie. I don't know why that was ever removed to begin with, but
Yeah.
it had to have some reasons. Beyond all of that, there are some good lines that Spock says in the film when they're deciphering the Klingon bird of prey. Was cloaked while shooting at the other ship, which resonate into the new Star Trek Bad Robot franchise. And so there was a couple dialogue lines that were pulled right from 6 that put into the new film, which was a good touch. And I really love the first of the Bad Robot films. I think that one really was the strongest for multiple reasons. But when it goes down to your moment of Star Wars,
Dumb-ism.
I do not like Vader saying no. It absolutely takes it out.
Ruins
110%.
Ruins the end of what was a beautiful moment.
Beautiful
like
moment.
a perfect moment in Star Wars history.
It is
like,
the pivotal moment.
It ruins.
Yes.
It literally ruins
Yes.
the best part of the Return of the Jedi. And sorry we just jumped into Star Wars, but it's the same level. It's like, why are you adding something to something that's already it's perfect the way it is. And Star Trek VI, the DVD,
had a version on the director's cut.
that completely was so unnecessary and threw me for such a loop, and I could not
It
help
broke the
but
flow.
I could not help but wonder whose idea was this. We didn't need any of
No.
this. So essentially, it's the mind meld scene where Spock,
Which is very somber.
yeah, very
And
quiet.
then they abruptly interrupt it 3 times.
For no reason, because they think that the audience was
Is-
not understanding
is
the
dumb.
the characters, because basically Spock's trying to extract from Valeris the conspirators' names because she's in on it, and as he's pulling the names out of her head, he's saying it and she's saying it at the same time. As they're saying it, they cut.
They flash.
like hard jump cut with a boom sound to a picture to footage of the character that they're saying. It's like,
And so you see the 3 characters' faces being thrown at you to tell you who they're talking about. This did not seem to me to be anything that was agreed upon by Nicholas Meyer. I don't know how that could have ever gone through. This was released, and I'm not sure if there's really many copies of it out there anymore because the current versions don't have it in it. So it kind of like how Disney re-releases their films. They'll go through, they'll trim, they'll edit, they'll move things around in some of their movies. It's amazing. Watch The Little Mermaid from 1989 to 2000, what it was released, 12 or 13. And the title sequence is completely different.
Really?
The same shots go through, but where they place the title in the musical cue gives you a completely different emotion.
really? Wow.
So there's a spot where like the fish goes down and the music starts, but in the original old version there was a credit there. But then the new version, now the credit starts at a different note. and gives you a completely different feel.
That's fine. I haven't seen The Little Mermaid since I was a kid.
And at the same time, where they had fades in the past, where they'd fade to black or fade in from black through the middle of the film, they would take those out and make it more modern for today. And so they're just little trims that purists won't want. But sometimes it may improve the film a little bit and give you a little different emotion. And I remember there's a big one that was a very big negative. And it was when she was at the end of her song and she was coming down, and Flounder's face comes down to sadness. They flipped the shots entirely to show Flounder's face sad first, so he got sad on a different note and a different line of hers. But,
oh my God.
But in turn, when she came down on the second and they flipped it, her movements didn't match the song. So it threw it out of sequence.
Bizarre.
Very bizarre, and the fan base uproared. I agreed the flip with Flounder's sadness gave you a completely different emotion with the line she was saying and his reaction. But it then threw the next shot where it looks like she was still saying another line from a distance, like she was still singing, but there were no notes, no words coming out of her voice. So I'll show it to you sometime, check it out sometime. But it meant, again, editing, just flipping two scenes could change the emotion of the scene.
Yeah.
So who in their right mind took Star Trek 6 and thought, we need to change this, because I have no clue what it is. And it's just this little tiny thing.
And it really is. It's like if you've never seen the original, either the extended cut, the first extended cut that you used to see on TV, or you were used to the theatrical cut, because I've been used to both versions. Yeah. If you've never seen those, you wouldn't think twice, and it probably, for people with a short attention span, and I'm not knocking anybody with a short attention span, but if you just saw it, you wouldn't think anything of it. But when you've become so accustomed to the movie,
the flow, and
you know who the characters are, it's jarring, it's irritating, and it's like, fuck you, man. What the hell is your
what
problem?
What did you just do?
Why would you do something like that?
Change the feeling.
We've been paying attention, and it really breaks, like you said, it breaks the flow of the scene. It's a very quiet scene.
It doesn't seem like it's an official scene. It seems like somebody's afterthought. Throw this in.
Yeah.
And here's the case where Nicholas Meyer has done a director's cut, or maybe it wasn't necessarily him who did this director's cut. It could have been the studio. But I prefer the director's cut version of Star Trek 6 over the theatrical.
Well, yeah, because it has those extra
elements really connect a little bit more to the film. Unlike my personal feeling with Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, where I felt it took you out of the film a little too much. It was nice to see additional scenes between the characters, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I will watch every single deleted scene that's out there on the floor. Star Trek Nemesis, I'm looking at you. But the fact is, sometimes they're trimmed for a reason, and it may not be the reason you like. Other times they're trimmed because it's just better, or they're, whatever it may be. So it comes down to there are multiple versions out there, and I believe iTunes currently has both, so you can have a choice. But I would definitely recommend the director's cut for Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country.
No, the Blu-ray is the theatrical.
Correct.
Okay, so
because it was not re-edited, I don't believe.
They never released a good extended version without the crappy additional boom scenes.
Correct. I think the boom scenes only came through on the DVD format.
That's terrible.
And I believe it was on the special editions.
Yeah, because I remember seeing
it wasn't on the original first release of 6. The original first release of 6 is just a straight version of the home. It's the director's cut.
Okay.
But it's not the theatrical cut.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's really funky.
That sucks.
So 6 has kind of been bastardized a little bit in some ways, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But overall, A+, 2 thumbs up for when you've gone through the franchise.
Yeah.
Especially as some of these fans have, when you've gone through a franchise from the 60s, where I only really came in from at the beginning of this movie, but I went back and watched it, and it's so connective, it's so enveloping. It is ultimately an early form of fantasy television and film and franchising, which we're getting a lot of today, and you get a lot more of it because everybody wants to build a franchise now.
Yeah.
But this is one that's been going on for now 50 years, and it's well earned its awards.
Yeah, and again, it was Star Trek 6 was a beautiful way to end the original series proper and fully for the full cast, because we always got to try to bring something back.
And look at what Star Trek has always done. How did it get so lucky to have a second pilot? Because the first one didn't do too well. How are you so lucky that you got a first movie? It just did okay, but enough to do a second one and improved. How much did you go to Star Trek V? And again, that just okay, it really didn't muster enough, but it allowed them to do another one.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, you can see the budget cut, you can see the similarities later on down with the Next Generation films, but they just did it with the right people. The right people who were behind the camera were working with the product that they loved, and they had something they wanted to work well with, and kudos. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, so, on that note...
Give us your thoughts.
Yeah.
Down below in the comments. If you actually sat through this, or just listened to it, I can understand. Minimize it to the side window and just listen while you do your work at night.
Yeah.
We
Or
can talk all day long. This is a 50-year-old franchise that we've only been involved with for maybe 25 some odd years.
And we're a couple of old codgers who could just go on and on and on and on and on, and we do, and
How
we
can
have.
I be old yet?
It happens.
But I am.
It happens to all of us who get that way. Anyway, so that was this is the end of our
Original series.
third video, focusing on Star Trek V and 6, which is the finale of the original series, the full crew of the original series, and join us for our fourth part.
How the heck are we going to put 4 movies in one?
Fourth part. Where we completely go apeshit and focus all of our attention and energies on the Next Generation series, all 4 films. Dear God, what the hell is wrong with us?
Yeah, I know. I just can't do another one where we divide.
So join us next time for part 4, coming at some point in the not too distant future.
Share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown brings me around again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh, no, I'm a rocket man. Rocket man, burning out his fuse out here alone.